The stars flickered above the burning planet of Virelia, a once beautiful world now drowning in fire and smoke. Cities that had stood for thousands of years crumbled like ash under the weight of orbital bombardments. Towers collapsed, fields turned black, and skies glowed orange with flame. The Virelians were a gentle race, brilliant in science and art but with no weapons to defend themselves. They had believed in peace, in treaties, in shared knowledge. But none of that mattered. Now, their enemies, the Tirak, were not interested in peace. They were a nightmare species bred only for war, massive insectoid beasts with hive minds and endless hunger. The Tirak ships hovered like dark gods above Virelia, raining destruction without mercy. Desperate, the Virelians sent out a signal, a cry across the stars, encoded with every language known, begging for help from anyone who could hear. "Please," the message repeated, "they are killing us. Anyone. Please help us." The signal carried the face of a Virelian elder, bruised and coughing, with a burning city behind him. A small child cried in the background, reaching for someone already gone. It was not a call for war, it was a call for mercy, and humanity heard it. On Earth, far across the Orion Arm, the signal arrived inside the command chamber of the Unified Earth Defense Council, a black glass room filled with stars projected on every wall. The room was silent as the recording played. Men and women in dark uniforms watched the footage, their faces set like stone. The woman at the center of the room, Admiral Kira Vance, stood unmoving. She had seen war before, had fought in the Crimson Belt Siege, had walked through blood and smoke, but this was something else. This was slaughter. This was genocide. When the message ended, no one spoke. The room was heavy with grief and fury. Then Admiral Vance stepped forward and broke the silence. "They begged for salvation," she said, her voice like steel wrapped in ice. "Let's give them hell." The decision was made. No debates, no delays. Earth's most powerful war fleet was mobilized within the hour. 87 ships, dreadnoughts, carriers, frigates, and stealth cruisers rose from orbit black and silver like the blade of a drawn sword. Each ship bore Earth's sigil and the words, "For Earth, for peace." These were not words of politics or pride. They were a vow. Humanity had not forgotten its past, how Earth had once nearly destroyed itself, how it had bled and burned and clawed its way to unity. And now, seeing another world on the edge of extinction, humanity would not look away. As the ships prepared to jump through the worm gate toward Virelian space, Admiral Vance stood on the command deck of Earth's flagship, the Sovereign Dawn. Her officers saluted her silently. They knew the cost that might come, but they also knew this was the right thing. Not for power, not for territory, but because a people had cried out in the dark, and humanity had decided to be the answer. Engines roared, worm space tore open, and the fleet disappeared into the stars, leaving only silence behind. The war to come would be brutal, vast, and unforgiving. But in that moment, one thing was clear. The Virelians had not cried out in vain. Earth was coming, and it was bringing the full fire of humanity with it. The Virelian system lay in chaos when humanity arrived. The Tirak swarm had already swallowed half the planet, and their dark, bone-like ships circled the sky like vultures. Fires raged across continents, and desperate Virelians tried to flee, underground, hiding in old scientific tunnels and caverns that had never known war. The human fleet tore through the worm gate like a lightning storm. Without warning, the Sovereign Dawn led the assault, launching waves of fighters and pulse torpedoes into the belly of the Tirak fleet. Explosions lit the dark like stars being born and dying in seconds. The humans didn't speak. They acted. Each ship moved with precision, their weapons guided by years of brutal training and battlefield instinct. The Tirak, caught off guard by this sudden fury, hesitated. No species had ever come to help the Virelians, and certainly none had struck this hard. For the first time, the swarm paused, and that pause cost them. Admiral Vance stood in the command bridge, her eyes locked on the live feed of the battle. She gave no speeches. She issued no dramatic orders. Her voice was calm, steady, full of steel. Focus fire on the dread carrier, cut their coordination. Human war AI worked instantly, adjusting firing patterns and guiding missiles to weak points. The Tyrak dread carrier, a massive spiked creature-like ship, cracked open under the bombardment, its insides bursting with light and black fluid. The swarm howled, a sound felt more than heard, and retaliated with pure rage. They swarmed Earth's fighters, claws tearing metal, acid breath melting through armor. Ships were lost, pilots screamed and vanished. But the humans did not stop. Below, on the scorched surface, special drop units slammed into the ground like meteors. Soldiers in dark exosuits breathing through harsh filters rushed into the chaos. Their boots crushed ash. Their rifles lit the smoke with burning trails. One of them, Commander Elias Ward, led his squad through the ruins of a collapsed Varelian learning center. The place had once been full of music and light. Now it was black with soot and death. Ward didn't speak much. His face was sharp, his eyes colder than space. But his actions spoke loudly. He moved like a ghost between walls, his weapon always ready, his hand always steady. His team followed without question. They weren't here for glory. They were here to save lives. Inside the shattered ruins, they found survivors. Thin, trembling, Varelians huddled behind cracked walls, too afraid to speak. A mother held her small child, her eyes wide with disbelief as she saw the humans. Ward didn't say a word. He simply knelt, offered his hand, and gently helped them up. He tapped his helmet twice. A moment later, a medpod landed nearby, opening its doors with a hiss. The humans shielded the Varelians as they ran. One Tyrak broke through the smoke, all claws and rage, but Ward dropped it in 2 shots. He didn't even blink. The sky above turned red as more Tyrak ships descended. The battle was growing worse. Vance watched the enemy regroup, shifting tactics. They were adapting. The Tyrak weren't mindless. They were strategic, fast, and deadly. "They're learning," one of her officers said. Vance nodded grimly. "Then we teach harder." She ordered a deep strike formation, something Earth fleets rarely used, dangerous and brutal. Human ships dove directly into the swarm's heart, sacrificing defense for firepower. Lasers burned through Tyrak hulls. Kinetic spears tore through their cores. Human pilots died. Many didn't return. But the swarm cracked. The cost was rising. Humanity was bleeding. But they did not retreat. They fought with everything: rage, memory, honor, and something more. A promise. Every Tyrak ship that fell was a message. "We heard your cry, and we will not stop." As the second wave ended, human forces gained a foothold around the Varelian capital ruins. Ward's unit dug trenches in the ashes and guarded the wounded. Above them, the remaining human fleet circled like silent sentinels. The Tyrak would return. Everyone knew it. But for now, for the first time in weeks, the Varelians had hope. Earth had come, and Earth was still fighting. Night fell over the ruined Varelian capital, but the war did not rest. Fires still burned in the distance, and the ground trembled with distant impacts. Commander Elias Ward crouched behind a shattered wall, watching the sky glow orange from orbital flashes. His squad was scattered around him, exhausted but alert, their armor dusty and scorched. They had pushed hard during the day, driving the Tyrak back from the outer zones and clearing evacuation paths for more survivors. But now came the hard part: holding. The Tyrak never stopped for long. Ward's breathing was slow and steady inside his helmet, his rifle resting on his knee as he studied the night with sharp eyes. Around him, the Varelians huddled silently in old tunnels and underground storage vaults, their soft blue skin streaked with dirt and soot, their bright eyes full of fear. And something more. Curiosity. They had never seen humans before. Never heard of Earth. But now they stared at these strange, scarred warriors who had come from the stars to fight for them. And slowly, hope began to grow like a tiny light in the dark. From orbit, Admiral Kira Vance watched the surface through tactical Overlays, her fingers folded tightly in front of her mouth. The enemy had pulled back, but only to regroup. The Tyrak were forming a second swarm, larger and angrier, gathering at the edge of the system. They had lost their element of surprise and now wanted revenge. "They're planning a full counter-assault," said her tactical officer, his face pale from reading the data. "Bigger than the last wave." Vance didn't flinch. She had expected this. "Then we hit them first." She ordered half the fleet to remain in orbit as defense while the other half would prepare for a long-range jump, right into the Tyrak's rear lines. If the swarm was regrouping, then humanity would strike its heart. No mercy, no hesitation. War was not about balance anymore. It was about survival. For Earth, for Virelia, for all free worlds. Across the Sovereign Dawn and every ship in the fleet, engineers ran to stations, pilots sealed helmets, weapons charged. Humanity had come with full force, and now it was going to strike even harder. Back on the ground, Ward received the update through his comm. A coordinated surface and space offensive would begin at dawn. His job was to keep the area secure until then and prepare the local Virelian resistance. Resistance was a generous word. Most Virelians had never held a weapon. But in the last few days, something had changed. Some of them now stepped forward asking for help, training, a way to protect their own. Ward looked into the eyes of a young Virelian scientist barely older than a teen, holding a scavenged energy blade with trembling hands. "Teach me," the boy said, voice shaking. Ward didn't smile. He simply nodded once. "First, you learn to survive. Then you learn to fight." And so, under the cover of night, Ward and his team trained a dozen Virelians how to use cover, how to move, how to aim. It was clumsy, awkward, but it was something. And sometimes, something is enough to change everything. Elsewhere in the Yao ruins, a squad of Tyrak scouts crept through the rubble trying to find weak points. One of them made it too close to a shelter zone. Ward's sniper spotted it from a tower window and took the shot. The creature fell silently. No alarm. But it was a reminder. The enemy was watching. Always. When the first light of dawn cracked across the horizon, the skies opened in a fury. Human warships struck deep into Tyrak territory, catching hive carriers and fuel nests off guard. Explosions rolled across the void. Tyrak screams echoed through comm intercepts. On the surface, ground units surged forward. Ward's team now, reinforced with barely trained Virelian volunteers, charged through the rubble like ghosts. They struck enemy scouts, cleared safe zones, pushed forward trench by trench. It was brutal, chaotic, and close. No clean victories. Just moments won through blood and grit. But it was working. The swarm was confused, reeling from the space strike above and the sudden resistance below. The humans pressed harder. By sunset, the front line had moved forward 3 kilometers. The Tyrak were still strong, still dangerous, but for the first time, they were on the defensive. In a crater filled with smoke and broken machines, Ward knelt beside a wounded soldier, pressing. A med seal over the injury, a Virelian child peeked over the rubble and whispered, "Are you going to win?" Ward looked at her, his face unreadable, then finally answered, "We don't plan to lose." Above, the Sovereign Dawn burned through space like a blade. The war was far from over, but something had shifted. The humans weren't just defending anymore. They were taking the fight straight into the swarm, and the galaxy would never forget what happened when Earth answered a cry for help. The war reached a boiling point when the Tyrak, furious from their losses, sent a full swarm strike toward the human fleet. Dozens of jagged living ships tore through space, screaming like monsters. The stars above Virelia turned red as the Tyrak's second wave roared into orbit. On board the Sovereign Dawn, Admiral Vance stood silent, her face hard as steel. She knew this moment was coming. Every ship in her fleet was already in formation, locked and loaded. Orders were not shouted. They had already been given days ago when the first humans set foot on this broken world. Every pilot, every gunner, every Marine knew what they had to do. The Tyrak came in fast, spitting acid missiles and bioplasma, crashing headfirst into Earth's line. The void turned into a storm of color and death. Turret blasts lit the dark, hulls cracked, debris rained like falling stars. But the human fleet held its ground. They moved like one being, perfectly timed, perfectly deadly. They gave no ground. The Tyrak were powerful, but Earth had brought fury. Down on the surface, the echoes of the space battle rumbled like distant thunder. Commander Ward and his team had pushed deep into the city's central grid, once the core of Virelian science and culture, now a graveyard of shattered glass and bone. Ward led a spearhead of humans and newly trained Virelians through the ruins, searching for an old data vault buried beneath the city. Inside that vault, scientists believed there might be maps, hidden tunnels, old energy lines, maybe even a way to disable the Tyrak's local hive beacon. That beacon was the enemy's eyes and ears, and if they could shut it down, they could blind half the swarm. But the path wasn't clear. Every street was a trap, every shadow a threat. Tyrak drones crawled from the rubble like insects, fast and sharp, screaming as they attacked. Ward's team fought hard, bullets and plasma bolts cutting through the night. Blood, human and alien, stained the ground. And still they moved forward. In a side alley near the vault site, Ward's unit was pinned. A large Tyrak beast had burrowed through the wall and now blocked their path, its armored limbs grinding against stone, its mouth split open in a hiss. One of the younger Virelians panicked, firing wildly and missing. Ward didn't yell. He acted. He threw himself sideways, rolling beneath a fallen beam, and opened fire from below. His shot struck the beast's underbelly where the plates were thin. It screamed and lunged, but Ward planted a charge and vaulted back just as the explosion tore it apart. Dust rained down. The team was shaken but alive. "Keep moving," Ward said, blood running down his arm. "We're close." They reached the vault just before dusk. The door was half buried in rubble, but the humans worked fast, clearing debris while the Virelian scientists decoded the lock. When the doors opened, it was like stepping into a lost world. Cold, quiet, untouched by war. Inside, glowing panels and ancient circuits flickered to life. Back in orbit, the Sovereign Dawn shook under direct fire. A Tyrak carrier had broken through the line and was charging their flagship. Vance didn't blink. She ordered a ramming run, something rarely done in modern war. The escort ship Eagle's Cry, already burning and beyond repair, launched forward at full speed, slamming into the enemy's side. The resulting explosion sent shockwaves across space. It wasn't enough to stop the swarm, but it bought time. And time was everything. Below, Ward's team pulled the data they needed. They now had the coordinates of a buried signal array, one tied to the Tyrak hive beacon. If they could overload it, the enemy swarm would lose command coordination across the entire region. It would be chaos for them. That was the opening Earth needed. Ward relayed the data to orbit. Vance responded with 2 words: "Make it happen." As night fell, Ward gathered his unit, checked ammo, and looked at the Virelians. They were tired, wounded, afraid, but still standing. Some now held rifles with steady hands. Some wore pieces of broken armor. They weren't soldiers, but they were no longer victims either. "This mission will break them," Ward said. "We kill their eyes. We kill their war." And with that, they moved out. Above them, the stars bled fire. Around them, the ground trembled with rage. But inside each heart, human and alien alike, there was something growing stronger than fear. The will to end this. The war had entered its darkest hour, and that was exactly when humanity shined brightest. The march to the signal array was nothing short of hell. Commander Ward's boots hit broken metal and cracked stone with every step, his team pressing forward through a maze of wreckage and shadow. Smoke choked the sky. Ash fell like snow. Around them, the once beautiful Virelian capital had become a skeleton of its former glory, its towers shattered, its streets twisted by war. The Tyrak weren't retreating. They were hunting. As Ward's squad moved, the enemy closed in from all sides, swarms of biomechs slithering through sewer tunnels and leaping from broken rooftops. The air trembled with their screeches, but Ward and his soldiers didn't stop. They moved in, tight formation, firing with precision, clearing the path one bullet at a time. A Varelian scout, barely more than a teen, took a plasma blade to the chest, protecting another soldier. She didn't scream. She just dropped, eyes open, looking toward the stars. Ward made sure her death wasn't in vain. He pulled her detonator and used it to level a nest of drones that had been closing in. Above, the sky burned. The Sovereign Dawn led what was left of the human fleet in a desperate countermaneuver. The Tyrak had reinforced their third wave, and now dozens more of their living ships slithered from hyperspace, attacking from angles once thought unreachable. Admiral Vance stood on the bridge, sweat dripping from her brow as she called for a flanking push. Her pilots flew like demons, through wreckage, through debris, even straight through enemy ships. They had no choice. Humanity had drawn a line in the stars. It was now or never. A destroyer named Sunbreaker took a massive hit, split in half, and even as the back half fell into the planet's gravity well, the front half launched its torpedoes with perfect aim, severing the Tyrak command ship's control spine. For a moment the tide shifted. Vance seized it. "Push all wings forward," she ordered. "Break them." On the ground, Ward and his team reached the outer shell of the signal array, a crumbling tower half buried under the remains of a science facility. The beacon itself pulsed faintly like a heartbeat in the center of a machine god. Tyrak drones crawled all over it, forming a living wall. Ward studied the terrain. There was no cover, no clean way in. So he made the call. Split teams, hit, them from both sides. No retreat, no hesitation. He and 4 others sprinted up the left flank, lobbing charges and ducking under collapsing beams. The enemy came fast, shrieking, blades drawn. It was a bloodbath. Sergeant Miko lost a leg but kept firing from the ground until she passed out. Private Saran, a quiet Varelian sniper, took down 6 Tyrak before a winged beast swooped down and dragged him into the sky. But for every human or ally who fell, 5 Tyrak died. The line broke. The wall thinned. Ward reached the signal core with only 3 soldiers left. He opened his backpack and began setting the overload charges. He had to work fast. Just then, the Tyrak Queen's voice echoed across every device. It wasn't sound, it was inside the mind like ice cutting into thought. She promised extinction. She promised Earth would burn next. And she laughed. But Ward didn't flinch. He looked up at the core, glowing like a sick sun, and he smiled. "We've heard worse," he muttered. Then he slammed the detonator in place. As he and the others sprinted from the tower, the first explosion ripped through the base. Then, another. Then the entire array lit up with a white-hot roar. The Tyrak scream was deafening, a signal cut off, a swarm thrown into chaos. Across the battlefield, alien drones staggered, twitched, then collapsed. In orbit, their ships spun aimlessly. Some retreated. Some crashed into one another. It was working. Admiral Vance saw it all from her viewport. "That's it," she breathed. "They're blind." She gave one final command. "Full assault. End this." The human fleet surged with fury. Fighters swept in at impossible angles. Bombers tore through the Tyrak's disorganized flanks. And from the Sovereign Dawn, the main rail cannon fired one last time, splitting the final Tyrak dreadnought down the center like rotten fruit. It exploded in silence. The void grew still. On the ground, Ward collapsed beside the broken core, exhausted and bleeding, but alive. Around him, Varelians slowly emerged from shelters and ruins, their eyes wide, their fear slowly replaced with awe. For the first time in decades, the skies above them weren't filled with screams, but with silence. The kind of silence that comes after surviving the worst storm of your life. The storm hadn't ended. It had only changed shape. With the Tyrak hive link broken, their army didn't surrender. It went mad. All across Varelian space, drones turned feral, snarling and slashing at anything nearby. including their own kind. Cities already in ruin now burned brighter as Tyrak monsters tore through streets like wild animals. Commander Ward, patched up but still limping, led his team through the wreckage, now a maze of death and panic. Survivors were everywhere. Virelians crying over loved ones, children lost and screaming, soldiers without orders frozen in shock. Ward didn't stop. He barked orders, rallied broken units, and pushed everyone toward one goal: hold the capital. If the capital fell now after everything, then all the sacrifice would mean nothing. The beacon array had blinded the swarm, yes, but without control, the Tyrak were dangerous in a new way, unpredictable and desperate. The queen was gone, but pieces of her still moved, fragments of her mind echoing in the chaos. Ward felt it, a dull throb in the skull, a whisper of hate. It made his blood run cold. They're still in there, he muttered to Sergeant Miko, who now walked with a mechanical leg and a fire in her eyes. And they want revenge. Above them, the sky boiled with new threats. A pocket of Tyrak vessels had escaped the jamming signal and were now forming up, swarming toward a backup relay station deep in the planet's orbit. Admiral Vance saw the danger immediately. If they get that relay working, she warned, they'll call for reinforcements from the outer rim. Humanity couldn't survive another wave. The fleet was battered. Ships were running on fumes. And yet, as soon as the danger was named, they moved. Old ships, damaged ships, even civilian craft joined the defense. The Sovereign Dawn, scorched and cracked, took point once more. Pilots flew with broken systems and scorched wings, dodging Tyrak fire through instinct and grit. No one asked for rest. No one asked to fall back. This was the last line. The fight for the relay became a dance of flame and steel. Missiles flew like rain. Hulls burst into light. Two frigates locked onto each other and crashed straight into a Tyrak cruiser, sacrificing themselves to keep the enemy away. Their names were never spoken. They had no time to mourn. Only push. Back on the surface, Ward's squad reached the final defense point, a ridge overlooking the palace ruins where hundreds of Virelians and humans now gathered, preparing to make a last stand. They had few weapons left. Ammunition was low. The wounded outnumbered the healthy, but they held. Ward stood on the front line, rifle in hand, watching the swarm come closer. Feral Tyrak beasts clawed up hills, drooling and shrieking. Biomechs skittered across rooftops. They didn't march like soldiers anymore. They charged like nightmares. But just before the swarm reached the ridge, a thunderclap shook the air. A bolt of plasma light tore across the battlefield. One of Earth's old carriers, thought lost weeks ago, fell from the sky, on fire, engines howling, and slammed into the Tyrak wave, crushing dozens of monsters beneath it. Then came the humans, drop pods from orbit, slamming into the ground, like falling stars. Reinforcements, the last wave. Ward laughed, not out of joy, but out of disbelief. They actually came, he said, eyes wide. The defenders rallied. With fresh troops beside them, they pushed forward, screaming into the chaos. Blood mixed with smoke. Screams filled the air. And somehow, through fire and steel and pure rage, they pushed the swarm back. On the edge of the battlefield, a strange shape limped from the shadows. It was tall, cracked, its body twitching with failing nerves. The Tyrak Queen's avatar, what was left of her, dragged itself toward the palace ruins, her form sparking and broken. Ward saw her. He didn't wait. He grabbed a launcher from a fallen Marine, ran through gunfire and aimed straight for her core. One shot, it hit clean. Her body folded inward, shrieked once, then burst into blue fire. The scream that followed shook the ground and knocked half the swarm flat. The rest scattered. Some froze. Some ran. Some fell and never moved again. The Queen's death had finished what the signal started. Tyrak control was truly gone. The battle ended in silence. Smoke hung in the air, thick and still. Ward dropped his weapon and looked up. For the first time he could see stars. Broken ships floated among them like ghosts. But they were quiet. The sky didn't scream anymore. Behind him, survivors wept, laughed, or simply sat down, too tired to do anything else. Admiral Vance's voice came through the comms, cracked and full of tears. "We held the line," she said. "We're still here." And for the first time since the war began, that was enough. Weeks passed, but the silence left behind by the Tyrak War still echoed through the stars. Rubble lay quiet where cities once stood proud, and smoke still curled from ruined towers. The cost of victory was written into every cracked wall and burned field. Graves lined the hills, some marked, most not. The Virelians began to rebuild slowly, carefully, with hollow eyes and aching hearts. Humanity stayed behind to help. Not just soldiers, engineers, medics, builders, teachers. Ward, still walking with a limp and a shoulder brace, worked among them. He taught survivors how to lay bricks, how to clear wreckage, how to believe again. Miko helped train young Virelian scouts to defend their world. Others followed suit. Earth's warriors had become its healers. Yet even as peace took its first small breaths, the galaxy stirred. Word of what had happened on Virelia spread like wildfire. Not the lies of before, the old stories that painted humans as dangerous animals, but the truth, raw and full of fire. That when the galaxy cried for help, only Earth answered. That when faced with extinction, humanity didn't hesitate. They brought war, not for conquest, but to protect. And they did not stop until the enemy was ash and silence. The Council of Orion, who had turned their backs on the Virelians before the war, now sat in shame and fear. The same humans they once mocked had stood alone against a galactic plague and won. The same species they had kept from power now held the respect of hundreds of broken worlds. Rumors began to spread, stories of Earth's fury, Earth's machines, Earth soldiers who fought through fire and screams without flinching. Some said Earth had a secret weapon hidden deep beneath its surface. Others claimed humans had no fear of death, that they were born to fight in darkness. A few believed Earth had made a deal with something older, something terrible, to win that war. None of it was true, but none of it mattered. What mattered was the message burned into every mind across the stars. If you ask humanity for help, know this: they will come, and they will not stop until the threat is gone, no matter the sort. Back on Earth, a monument rose, not grand, not shining, but strong. Carved into its black stone were the names of the fallen, human and Virelian alike. Beneath those names, just 7 words. They pleaded for salvation. We gave war. Children were brought there to learn. Veterans came to cry. Leaders came to remember. Commander Ward stood before it often. He would touch the cold surface, say nothing, then walk away, always with the same quiet fire in his eyes. Humanity had not won because they were the strongest. They won because they refused to lose, because they saw allies where others saw burdens, because they held the line when no one else would, and still, even in peace, the stars watched. Knew threats would come. They always did. The galaxy was wide and full of shadows. But now, when those shadows moved, they paused. Because Earth was awake. The species that had once been overlooked, feared, pushed to the edge, had become something else, something unstoppable when pushed. Humanity did not seek power. They did not ask for thanks, but if ever again a cry echoed across the stars, if another world begged for salvation, the humans would answer. Not with hesitation, not with conditions, but with everything they had. Relentless, united, and unbreakable. This time the galaxy would remember that forever.